So now that a lot more people have seen Joker 2, I feel like it's time I gotta defend the movie a bit because there is a lot of hate for this movie online right now. It is getting all sorts of negative reviews across the board on IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, Letterboxd, all around. It is getting really negative reviews from critics and also audiences. Now, I wouldn't say it's like all the way the side of negative. It's not like one of the worst rated comic movies ever. It's not that far. It's more so divided, I would say, pretty much split down the middle, at least from what I'm seeing. And I expected that watching the movie, to be completely honest. But what I didn't expect was a lot of the responses and the criticisms that people are giving. I was expecting the criticisms to kind of just be centered around the fact that it's a musical and the fact that it's very different. And some of the criticisms are that. But there's also a lot of criticisms I just quite frankly think are just big misunderstandings for what the movie is actually representing. Now, before we get into this, let me be absolutely clear. If you hate the movie, you are totally allowed to. You are totally allowed to dislike the movie. This is just my own defense for it. I'm going to be giving as many different defenses to different points I've been hearing about the movie, and we will be talking spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie, maybe don't watch the video unless you don't care about spoilers, then you can watch the video anyways. But let's get into this. I have a lot of different pieces of criticism that I've been hearing that I'm going to talk about and I'm going to give a full response to. The first big one I've been hearing ever since it was first announced that it was even going to get a sequel in the first place, and this is the fact that Joker doesn't need a sequel, right? Everyone kept saying that. Everyone's saying this movie does not need a sequel. Why are they doing a sequel to Joker? It ended so perfectly. Why do another movie? It makes no sense, right? I think that is one of the laziest and most obnoxious pieces of criticism anyone can give because it makes no difference to the actual quality of the movie itself. Most sequels do not need to be made. Terminator 2 did not need to be made. Aliens did not need to be made. Most sequels do not need to exist. But guess what? They do, and they're amazing movies, so that's why nobody ever says that Terminator 2 did not need to exist or Aliens. Nobody says that about those movies because they're amazing. They're great, so who cares? Same would go for this movie. If someone ended up really loving Joker 2, they're not going to be going around saying, oh, Joker never needed a sequel because they ended up loving the sequel. But if they hated the sequel, then they're going to go around and say, oh, Joker never needed a sequel. Why are you even mentioning that? Just talk about the movie itself. There's no reason to even talk about the prior movie, whether or not it needs or doesn't need a sequel. Most sequels don't need to be made. That's how movies work. Someone has an idea and says, oh, that could be an interesting way to continue that story. They didn't have to, but they did, and it worked. For me, at least. And if it doesn't work for you, then that should be your criticism. What about the movie didn't work for you? Saying that it just didn't need a sequel is not actual criticism. It's really not. The next piece of criticism is something that I've actually heard a lot of people say about the first Joker movie as well, and I honestly don't get it whatsoever. It's the idea that the movie is shallow, it lacks themes, it lacks meaning, it lacks depth. Now, when it comes to the first movie, don't get me wrong. Yeah, the themes there are themes that have been done in prior films. It's been done, it's been done before for sure, and it's not the most deep movie ever. No. But the way the themes are presented in the movie, the way they're executed, is what I love so much about it. And there is a lot of talk about in regards to it. Is it the deepest thing ever? No, it's a pretty simple movie about, a person with, severe mental illnesses and is pushed to do some awful things because of how society treats him and just in general, just a lot of stuff going on in that movie. But the way it's presented, there's a lot of awesome symbolism in that movie, a lot of just shots that they have so much meaning to them if you really look into it. And I've broken down the movie before, and I love it. I think it's such a well-made film. I think there's so much to it. So the sequel obviously has similar themes, but it's also quite different. So what it's basically about is Arthur dealing with this Joker persona that he's embraced since the first movie. Obviously, the way the movie ends, the first movie, he ends in a position where he finally feels supported. He finally feels like he's part of something and that people actually notice him. That's literally the whole point of the movie, right? That's why he embraces that. Even though he was doing bad things, he embraces it. But the second movie is him dealing with that. He's dealing with the consequences of it. He's actually noticing the consequences of what he's done. He's actually getting to see it firsthand, whereas he wasn't necessarily seeing the negative consequences in the first one. Instead, all he saw was the positive consequences. He saw all these people rising up and going against Gotham, and that was something he thought was a positive thing. He loved to see it. He thought it was beautiful. And then in this movie, he's directly faced with the actual negative consequences, such as the trial scenes with Gary sitting there looking at him, like crying, talking to him, saying that he like respected Arthur, and after seeing what he did, it's like he couldn't anymore. And you even had a scene where one of the fathers of one of the kids that were shot, I guess they weren't really kids, they looked like they were young adults, whatever, the guys in the subway. One of the fathers of one of those guys was at the trial and literally attacked Joker in some scene. Like, there's so many different scenes where he's face to face with what he's done, and we didn't see really much of that in the first movie. It was all just internal. It was all just him feeling different ways when he's doing it, and you saw him feeling better and better as the movie went along, because of what he's doing, even though it's putting him in really stressful situations. And this is, in my opinion, actually quite deep, even though well, everyone says it's not, and I don't understand how you can't say this is at least not somewhat deep. But the whole concept is that society can embrace bad actions as long as it's from someone that's on the same side as them. And when I say side, it just means general in terms of like similarities to them. And in this case, it has a lot to do with the class, right? Because he was going against the upper class, he was going up against the government and Gotham itself. People respected the hell out of that, even though he was killing people. And they don't know exactly who he was killing necessarily. They don't know every single person that was killed, at least not until the trials. But there's a lot of people who supported him and defended him, probably because they had lives that were also negatively affected by the way Gotham was handled. There's a lot of deep shit there that could apply to real world things, and people just forget it exists because I don't know. Like, sure, if you want to say it doesn't really have much to say that other movies haven't already said, that's fine, because I'm sure other movies have. But just because other movies have done similar things does not mean this movie isn't deep whatsoever. It does not mean this movie has no thematic importance. That's just lying straight up. And I mean, the sequel literally starts with the shadow of Arthur kind of like overriding him, essentially. There's like this cartoon where you see his shadow there, and a lot of people, when they first saw that, me myself included, I honestly thought the shadow was going to eventually represent Harley. I thought that's what the direction they were going, but that was not it at all. The shadow there is the Joker persona. It overshadows him, and it's the only thing people care about. It's the only thing they focus on. They do not care about Arthur. They do not care about his mental illnesses. They do not care about any of that. They just care about his Joker persona. And Arthur doesn't really realize that. He doesn't notice that in the first movie. When he sees everyone looking up to him, he sees everyone looking up to him as who he is, right? And of course, he knows, you know, obviously part of it is him doing what he's done and stuff like that. And that's why he embraces the Joker persona. But he doesn't realize that, like, genuinely, if he just stopped doing the Joker persona, they would stop respecting him. He doesn't realize that until Joker 2, until he does it. And then he realizes, yeah, there's a lot of people who kind of just don't care about him anymore now. And the whole Joker persona, it kind of, Arthur is able to almost break out of it, I think, because of a lot of the scenes where he is becoming face to face with his consequences of what he's done. Like, he literally comes face to face with it. I think the best scene in the movie is the scene where he's on trial with Gary, and he's talking to Gary, and everything Gary says to him is so important. It's easily my favorite scene in the movie, because he's saying, you know, you were the only one who didn't make fun of me. He was saying, like, you know, I understand that, you know, you were bullied and stuff, but then they didn't deserve to die. Like, he's face to face with these things that Gary is saying, and you can see in his face, he's still trying to act like the Joker. He's being all comedic in that scene. He's making fun of the fact that his last name was Puddles. But you see deep down in his eyes, and people are saying Joaquin Phoenix's acting was not that good in this movie. They're talking out of their ass, man. His acting was phenomenal in this scene, especially because you can see deep in his eyes. You can see he's dealing with the fact that he realizes that it wasn't right. Like, he actually does. He's able to break out of it, and then that's why very shortly after that he decides to say that he's not the Joker. He doesn't want to be that, and Harley just drops him immediately. And now, I personally wrote that as a negative for the movie. I thought how quickly Harley dropped him was kind of like, it felt too rushed. It felt too fast. But looking back at it, like, I don't really know if I hate it as much as I did when I first watched it, because I feel like in a lot of ways, Harley kind of represents the audience in a weird way. And let me explain this. It sounds crazy, but hear me out. Harley is so obsessed with Joker. She's idolizing him. She's obsessed. She does not care about Arthur, though. She really doesn't, deep down. We don't really realize that until later on in the movie, but at first, you can tell she does not care, or later on, you can tell she does not care about Arthur. She does not care about his mental illnesses, any of that. She does not care to help him. She just loves that fantasy of what Joker is. And a lot of audience members are like that too. They watched the first Joker, not even realizing that he was the bad guy. Yes, there are actually people out there who were like that. Now, I'm not saying most audience members are like that. I think most people can see that what he was doing was wrong, but whatever. A lot of people watch that movie and genuinely like idolize Joker and see him as like a hero for the lower class or something like that. And that's not what he's at all. That's just not what he is. But he saw himself as that. Harley sees him as that. And so the second he decides to drop that persona, she drops him. She doesn't care about him anymore. The same way a lot of audiences reacted to this movie ending the way it did, where he dropped the Joker persona. A lot of people's problem with this movie, and we're going to jump into the next point now, is the fact that it undoes some of the first movie. Now, I think this is, a criticism I can slightly understand, because if you really love that first movie, you love how it ends, and you think it's a perfect origin story for Joker, just leave it at that, right? I can understand why undoing that might upset you, but I think with what this is trying to do, I think it's perfect, because this isn't meant to be an actual origin for the Joker we're going to see in a future franchise or something like that. This is a separate Elseworlds project, that's its own thing. It's its own universe. We're never going to see something from this universe again, most likely. We might see a Harley Quinn movie in the future, probably not, but I don't think they're going to do that personally, at least not with Lady Gaga. But this is something that's so separate that you don't need to have him actually stay as the Joker all the way through. You don't. You can actually find a way to do an interesting story with this and have Joker be less of a character and more of a idea. And I actually think that's kind of brilliant. When I saw the end of the movie, I was not surprised by Arthur dying, unfortunately, because it was spoiled for me. Whoever spoiled it for me, fuck you. Somebody on Twitter did it. They can go fuck themselves. That's all I'm saying. When that happens, I really like how you could see in the background the guy who did it was giving himself the smile with the knife, which I thought was a nice touch, because actually originally in the first movie, the end scene where Joker gives himself a smile with the blood, he's not doing it aggressively with a knife or anything like that. He's just doing it like that. And I believe there was a conversation where Todd Phillips originally actually was going to have a scene where he was going to pick up glass instead and cut it with it, but he realized it was kind of too ridiculous. Just the scene looked better, and I'm glad they did it the way they did it. I think it was perfect. It's my favorite scene, one of my favorite scenes in a movie ever. So I'm glad they did it the way they did it, but I like how this scene shows this other guy who's now essentially becoming the Joker in his own sense and giving himself that smile with the knife. I thought that was cool. And it has the idea that what Joker represents will always live on through someone. And I think it makes sense, because Joker in a lot of ways usually doesn't have an identity to him. That's kind of the whole purpose of Joker. A lot of times we don't know the origins of Joker. We don't know their name. We don't know much about them beyond they're the Joker. That's all they are, right? So I think taking that concept of what the Joker has always been in comics and going, okay, let's make it into an idea rather than a singular character is kind of fucking brilliant. Because a lot of people actually, it's funny because a lot of people actually criticize the first movie for giving Joker an origin story, for giving him a name, for giving him all this stuff, whereas that's kind of not usually what Joker is about. But doesn't this movie kind of actually deliver on what the Joker is usually about? It's not about the person, it's about the idea of who he is. And I think that's fucking brilliant, but I don't know, people don't seem to care. I don't know. Yeah, is it undoing the ending of the first movie? Sure, but why is that a bad thing? That movie still exists on its own right. I love that movie. I can go watch it. I can, watch it from beginning to end. It's its own complete film of him rising as the Joker. It's beautiful, right? And then you see the sequel, and it's kind of the downfall of Joker. Is that not kind of cool to see? You got two movies that work together so well. I like that. And what I was saying before, yes, Harley Quinn's character in a lot of ways is what the audience, some audience members have been kind of reacting about this movie. The second he said he's not Joker, people just said this movie's shit. This movie, they don't care about it no more. They do not. I literally saw somebody saying, I didn't sign up to watch an Arthur movie. I signed up to watch a Joker movie. That is literally the theme of the fucking movie. And I think it's so funny. And I think people are calling Todd Phillips dumb. I'm like, he made a movie that somehow is taking what the audiences are going to see as a movie. Some audience people, again, not everyone, some of the audiences are going to take from this movie. He's able to put that into a character in the movie before the movie even comes out, before people even say anything about it. I mean, I'm sure he knew it was going to be a divisive movie. I don't think he went into this thinking, oh yeah, this is going to be a home run, 100, on Rotten Tomatoes. No, I'm sure he was expecting some divisiveness, and I'm sure he was okay with that. But I think it's kind of cool that he put social commentary into the movie involving that concept itself. The fact that nobody really cares about Arthur or his mental illness. They just care about Joker. They just want to see Joker. They want to see... There are a lot of people who genuinely told me they just wish this movie was just Joker and Harley Quinn killing people for an hour or 2 hours or whatever. That's genuinely what a lot of people wanted. And don't get me wrong, they could have made a movie like that would have worked just fine, and I would have loved it. I'm sure they could have done a movie like that if they did it well, where, maybe Joker breaks out of Arkham and then he goes on a killing spree with Harley. A killing spree of killing maybe people who are morally corrupt in some way, shape, or form. So it fits in more with the first movie. I would have probably enjoyed that movie, sure. But that's not what he wanted to do with this movie. That's not the vision he had. And I actually respect the hell out of his vision. I really do. I think people just fundamentally misunderstand what Arthur's character is. Like, he's not some fucking hero. He's not. And I think that's also important to keep in mind. The first movie is completely from Arthur's POV. A lot of people forget that. And I mean, so is the second movie for the most part. I would say there's a couple scenes that are from Harley's POV, but most of it's from Arthur's. But first movie is entirely Arthur's POV, right? And since he never had any time for any introspection in that movie, you don't really see the movie. Like, the movie's not actively telling you that he's a villain. It's not. You have to infer that yourself. You have to use critical thinking and media literacy to put that together, or just normal common fucking sense. But yes, if you just watch the movie just regularly, because it's from his perspective, the movie's not telling you, oh yeah, this guy's a villain. It actually makes it seem like he's a hero, because you have that ending hero shot where he's sitting there with his arms up, everyone's cheering him on. He's got this heroic music. It's dark heroic music, but it's still dark. It's there. It's not telling you this guy's a villain. It's not. You have to fucking just, again, use common sense. So we go into the sequel. Yes, it is kind of breaking that a bit. It is kind of deconstructing what that movie was and saying, you know what, this guy who people were idolizing, he probably shouldn't be what he is. And I think that's actually an interesting route to go. They could have done something so lazy with this movie, but they didn't. They did something actually pretty bold and daring, which is why it's insane that I've been seeing people call this a cash grab. How is this a cash grab? If it was a cash grab, why would they do something as bold as make it a fucking musical? And why would they go as far as to do some of the things they did in the movie? If they wanted to play it safe, they could have. They could have done something simple. They didn't. And I appreciate that. I think if they did something simple, it could have worked just fine. But I kind of like how much they were swinging for the fences here. Last thing I want to talk about is actually the musical aspects itself, because I do feel like this is also a thing that a lot of people misunderstand. Now, obviously, if you don't like musicals, if you don't like anything similar to that, then yeah, you're probably not gonna like this movie, and that's completely fine. Like, I can't tell you that, oh, you have to like musicals. No, if you don't like them, you don't like them. That's fine. I do think this is not really a traditional musical though, so you definitely could enjoy it even if you don't like musicals, because one of the things I feel like a lot of people don't like about musicals is the overall cheesiness of them. Sometimes, not all of them, but a lot of them have that cheesy feel to it, mainly because of the fact that they're singing their own dialogue. You know what I mean? They're going through scenes and singing dialogue, essentially. That's what most musicals are. And don't get me wrong, I think musicals are cool. I enjoy some of them, but I feel like that's something that's hard for people to get into. But this movie's not like that. They're not singing their dialogue. They're singing actual existing songs. Now, the lyrics of the songs have importance to what's going on with those characters at that point in the movie, but they're not like singing their own dialogue. So I wouldn't really call it like a typical musical. It's very different, but regardless, I think what I don't understand is a lot of people saying the musical elements make no sense in the movie and have no place in the movie. That I don't get, because even after just rewatching the first movie, it pretty clearly is just building off of what the first movie already did. The first movie had Arthur dancing in like 7 scenes in the movie, maybe even more than 7 scenes. There's multiple times where Arthur dances in that movie, and the reason he's dancing is to essentially escape reality. That's kind of the whole point of it. He's stressed out. He's not sure what to do after he killed those 3 guys in the subway. So what does he do? He goes in the bathroom and he dances. He literally there's a scene of him dancing for a minute long. It was a beautiful scene. Everyone respects the hell out of that scene, but they don't understand the actual implications of it. He's essentially escaping reality for a second. He's just going to another place, and dancing does that for him for some reason, right? And I think that's an interesting aspect to that character. Then you go to the sequel. There's this whole aspect of music that's brought up pretty early on in the movie. You know, Harley's talking to him about music and what it does for her. It's basically the next step after dancing. What do you do after you dance? You sing. Like, they go hand in hand. So not only is he now dancing, he's also singing. And that's another way for him to essentially escape reality. And he frequently does that in the sequel, where the scenes are very otherworldly. He's in his own head. He's not always just singing out loud. Some of the scenes he's singing out loud, but most of them, they're another world that he's in. And I think that's pretty cool. The first movie actually even ends with Arthur singing the song That's Life.
And as funny as it may seem, some people get their kicks stopping on a dream.
He literally is singing it. Like, I'm not saying that they were teasing that the sequel was going to be a musical all along. I don't think they were ever planning a sequel when they first made that movie, but doesn't matter. It somehow works quite well with this movie. And yeah, does it feel a little weird sometimes in the movie? Sure. And I understand some people don't like the musical sequences in the movie. They felt like they were a bit sluggish and didn't have as much of a spectacle to them. I can understand that to an extent. And I actually said that as part of my criticism for the movie as well. But it's a small piece of criticism. It's not like oh, this movie sucks now because of this. No, it lost a couple points because of it. Okay. At the end of the day, if you don't like the movie, you don't like the movie. That's completely fine. You're allowed to dislike it. But I would love to hear some of your arguments in the comment section down below. If you don't like the movie, I would love to have some debates, civil debates, of course. And I would just love to see what you guys think. But in terms of what I talked about today, these are the ones that I feel like I've been seeing very often, and I feel like I just had to say something about it. I had to discuss it because it was really, I've been seeing so many tweets about it, and it seems like a lot of people online absolutely hate the movie. I think it's also important that you go see the movie for yourself, though. I'm sure most of the people still watching this video at this point have already seen it, but go watch it yourself. Stop letting the online people tell you what to think. Stop letting Rotten Tomatoes tell you what to think. I will say what's surprising me most is that I feel like a lot of people are giving it like really low ratings though. Like it's not like they're just like, oh man, I don't really love it, but there's some stuff to enjoy about it, and giving it like a 2.5 out of 5. I see people giving it like a 1 out of 5 on Letterboxd. Like people that like I usually agree with their opinions on things, and they just absolutely hated this. I'm genuinely shocked by it, because even if you didn't like maybe like some of the narrative aspects, I feel like it's really hard to not love at least the visuals, you know. So I feel like you gotta give it some credit there. But yeah, like regardless, it's all up to opinions at the end of the day, and I'm not gonna say you can't dislike a movie, because I think that would be a ridiculous thing to say. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I will see you guys all in my next one. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Peace out.